As you watch the screen, your heart begins to beat faster. There's a fluttering in the pit of your stomach. Your throat is dry. Your palms damp. Suddenly a chill runs down your spine. You clutch the person next to you. You tell yourself, it's only a movie. It's only a movie. But sooner or later, it's time to go home.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Jay.
I'm Ron.
And we're happy to welcome a longtime friend, first-time guest, nerd by day, superhero by night, one half of the Two Broke Geeks, FBI's most wanted, unwanted podcast, Santa Ambassador, Baconator Supreme of the United Church of Bacon, and published author, Matt. Matt, please say hello to folks. Tell them a little bit about yourself.
That's me. Hello. Yes. Wow. FBI's most wanted. I haven't done that show in a bit. We kind of stopped doing that one, but people can listen to the episodes that there are. Hey, Jay, Ron, thanks for having me. Jay, I'm going to warn you, Ron already knows this because he's recorded with me. You have invited pure insanity onto your show. So you said I'll try to not be too insane so you don't have to edit too much because you did give me the one edit challenge, but we'll see what happens because I don't ever stop fucking talking. So
well, that is why we brought you here, and it is to part of our wonderful Shocktober lineup to talk about Us, starring Lupita Nyong'o, Winston Duke, Shahadi Wright, Joseph Evan Alex, Elizabeth Moss, and Tim Heidecker. Written and directed by the great Jordan Peele, released in 2019 on a $20 million budget, grossed over $256 million at the box office. I was happy to say I was a good chunk of that. I went and saw this twice in theaters. Saw it once with my wife, once by myself. Was just fascinated with it. And we picked this for Shocktober because we've been doing these kind of Shocktober grab bags for a few years now. So we're not just doing series as much anymore. And we haven't covered any Jordan Peele stuff, but I know I like him, and Ron and I've talked about him, and I have distinct memories of seeing this, but I want to hear from y'all. And Matt, we'll start with you. What's your background with Jordan Peele and with Us?
Sure. Number one, 2019, Jesus, seems like a lifetime ago this movie came out. When I read 2019, because I had kind of forgotten, when I read 2019, I was like, wow, this movie's way more recent than I remembered it being. No, I had seen, of course, Get Out, which was Jordan Peele's debut film, and I really liked it. I liked the idea of heady horror and horror that was about something. And the trailer for Us looked just astounding and amazing. And so I couldn't wait to see it. And I wasn't let down. One thing I said to somebody the other day when I posted somewhere about watching this was, I was like, I like this one better than Get Out. And I was like, I kind of like this one better than Get Out as well. Not because there's anything wrong with Get Out, but it's Get Out wears its message on its sleeve. It's about what it's about, and it's not a thinker. Us, and we'll get into this as we talk about it. Us is not entirely clear what it's about. I have ideas about what I think it's about, and I've read some stuff about what other people think it's about. But in that way, I think it's very much just good art in that everybody can kind of come away from it with a different interpretation.
Yeah, I'm with you just real quick on Jordan Peele. Get Out was very much a movie about what it's about, and was really well acted, and it was actually shot in some places that I know really well, where not far from where I'm from or where I've got family. So that was kind of the draw to go see that. Plus, I knew Key and Peele, and I thought, okay, comedy and horror are very close siblings. Like
they both rely on the subversion of expectation.
Exactly. Right? And who better to do that than sketch comics? I'm like, yeah, I'm down for that. No problem, And so, I mean, I give Ghostbusters as a great example. As a kid, that movie is scary as hell, as a little kid. Later on, it's not, but it's also funny. And it's a lot, again, there's a lot of subversion in it. So I was down for that. And I liked all of the things about Get Out. But when I saw the trailer for this, and I heard what they did to that rap song from 1995 that we're going to talk about, I was like, Oh, I'm in. I'm totally in now because I must see what this is without even knowing what it was. And it's interesting to hear you say that you maybe care for this one a little bit more than Get Out. I'll get into that maybe a little bit later in the show, but I I think Jordan Peele has made three very different movies for three very different reasons. Get Out
Sure.
was about a message. I think Us was about, can I create something that just makes people talk about something? And I think Nope, just real
Still
quick,
haven't seen Nope.
was his. I think it's his Spielberg popcorn movie. I think people put way too much into it and wanted something that wasn't there. And he's like, no, it's kind of my weird ET, but it's worth seeing anyway. Ron, what about you and Jordan Peele and then Us?
Weirdly enough, I've never seen a Jordan Peele movie until I watched this one for the podcast.
Oh, okay.
Shocking.
Podcasting is an audio medium, but I am shocked.
You could
Shock
well,
face.
it's the audio was loud enough that you're on your end, they could hear your mind exploding when you heard that. Yeah. Somehow I've just never seen any of the Jordan Peele movies all the way through. So first time watch for me.
Very cool. I did not know that coming into this. So this is a genuine surprise. That's always fun because the joke on Film Strip is trying to find something that one of us hasn't seen 20 times, and so especially at this point. And so that's really fun. Matt, you brought it up, this idea of kind of heady or elevated horror, which has really had a renaissance in the last 10 years, you want to say?
Yeah.
Maybe a little further. And I know some people look at that and they go like, oh, it kind of strips the fun out of it. And to that, I say, like, I think everything has to evolve over time. I like the idea sometimes of watching something that is as mindless or doesn't ask as much of your brain as like maybe Jason X. It's just fun and, it's just there for the slaughter and all that. And then sometimes I like to watch stuff like The Witch, or this and really kind of have to put my brain into it. What do you think about elevated horror? Where are you on that?
It depends. For me, like, I'll tell you a movie I absolutely fucking cannot stand. It's unbearably bad, in my opinion, is The Babadook. And I
Thank
know
you.
people rave about The
Thank
Babadook.
you.
I couldn't stand that movie. But
Our friend
like,
Anthony is cringing somewhere
I know,
right now,
I
by the
know.
way.
But like, it's not that elevated horror. I mean, in some ways, precursor to elevated horror was something like The Silence of the Lambs. The Silence of the Lambs isn't necessarily a particularly gory film. It's what it is. I mean, it's a serial killer story, but it's not a slasher. It's, a lot more dread, a lot more
It's a cop
mood,
story.
cop story.
Huh.
But then like there's something like It Follows. Like I love It Follows.
Same.
So it
Yeah.
it depends on the movie. Like I think your film has to present me with stuff that is genuinely scary, but also genuinely interesting if you're gonna do something. You can't just have an quote unquote elevated horror film that is just a thinker and isn't scary in any way, has no creepy moments. And in the case of the Babadook, has a kid screaming in the back of a car and the mother screaming back and all this. Just it's drama. At a certain point, it becomes drama, not horror, versus other things that you mentioned, like Hereditary, The
Yeah,
Witch,
I was about to bring that one up. Yeah, Hereditary
that
is a
kind of
good
thing.
example.
So
yeah.
just for elevated horror for me, it's just dependent on the movie.
I'm of two minds about the term elevated horror. Number one, I understand it's a marketing phrase, and but that's why it gets used. It helps horror movies escape you know, the the B movie assumption that comes along with saying, "Oh, it's a horror movie." But at the same time, it's also like really kind of reductive to movies that are traditional horror movies, I guess. Like, I don't love the classism of the phrase elevated horror. Uh,
That is kind of funny that we're talking about a Jordan Peele movie and it's got a classism label to it, by the way.
but did he call it elevated horror, or did the
No,
marketing
no,
department
Well,
no,
and
call it
no.
especially
elevated horror?
since if we're going to
Yeah.
talk about classism, we'll talk more about classism as we talk about this movie.
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
no,
we'll definitely get there.
he just called it a horror movie. That's all he says. But
I mean, I guess to me the difference between an elevated horror movie and a regular horror movie is what song they use slowed down and pitch shifted to make it scary. Like, are we getting
Yeah.
like Gillian Welch? Or are we getting
Getting Lunas.
Lunas or NWA?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are we getting Freebird? Are we getting NWA? In that case, it's not necessarily elevated horror. It's probably
What
just
if we
regular
just
horror.
But what if we just slow down Tiny Tim, but don't pitch shift him at all? So instead of tiptoe through the tulips, we get tiptoe.
Yeah.
Somehow made that more
Terrible to follow.
creepy.
And the fact that we can see Matt's face as he's doing the Tiny Tim face while he's singing this,
It's
probably
yeah.
unconsciously, because I think everyone has to do that face when they do that voice.
You don't have a choice. That's just how it
Yeah.
comes out.
There's no other way to do that. No, I agree. I find that I think you make a good point, Ron, that it is a little reductive sometimes to say that kind of stuff, but it's a way to classify some of these things because every genre has its own subgenre. You know, you talk about punk music and then there's 75 trees off of it, right? You know, or whatever you want to say. And this is the same kind of thing. And I also feel like it's a term that got invented by critics, among other things. And not to bang on critics and stuff, because some of them are not. I know some critics and they're nice people, but they're not bad people and stuff necessarily. But you just have we love to, particularly in our culture, we love to label everything, and particularly when it comes to art, like America sort of invented that. And that's funny that we're talking about that because this movie, in a lot of ways, is a big ass mirror and microscope about American culture. And I think that's what Jordan Peele was really getting into. But he is also, one thing I appreciate him about as a filmmaker is much like the way Christopher Nolan is, and even like Steven Spielberg is, and a lot of people, they will make a movie about something, but they believe very much in that once you give it to the audience, it's theirs, and I'll quote Noel Gallagher. Somebody asked him, what the hell is a champagne supernova anyway? He said, I don't know, but 60,000 people singing it back to you means it's awesome. And I'm like, I agree with that. Sometimes you just got to let the audience tell you what it is. And
it's not to bring up his name and everything like that in terms of movies and everything, but in terms of music, I say all the time, man, I'm a big fan of Rob Zombie. I couldn't tell you what one single one of his fucking songs is actually about. They are, and I'm dying. I would love to get him in a room and just say, man, are you purposefully writing nonsense, or does any of this mean anything to you? Like, what is the dead I am the one eliminating sun, skipping through the trees, strangling the breeze? What does that mean?
It's all about digging through the ditches and burning up the witches, man.
Yeah, this is the song about how Dracula's dope. That's a great episode of The Monsters, man.
Right?
I mean, you make a great point, and Zombie may be one of those good examples of this kind of stuff where you want to classify him, but he almost defies it in some ways. And once you feel like you've pinned him into it, he'll just go in a different direction. The Monsters movie is a great example of this. I mean, he is the king of trashy white trash horror, in a lot of ways.
I feel like I'm the only person in the world, by the way, that didn't totally hate that movie.
Hey man,
it was awful.
You're the second. I thought it was funny.
Okay.
I was like,
I didn't think it was that. I didn't think it was great, but I didn't think it was bad.
I thought it was funny that Rob Zombie said, "Oh, y'all don't think I can make just a comedy that isn't weird, then isn't just gross? Okay, bet." And then went and did it, and I was like, "Okay, it's maybe the best scary actress moment."
And somehow someone gave him the rights to do the monsters. That's the craziest part of that whole story. He didn't have to make the Monster Family or the Monstrosos or the
sure,
the weird neighbors who live on Weird Street.
Yeah.
He got the rights to make a Monsters movie.
Mm-hmm.
Someone said, Robert S. Zombie Esquire, Monsters application. Yeah, rubber stamp. Boom. Let's do it.
I mean, the jokes wrote themselves. Like, it's going to be the nastiest Monsters movie you could ever imagine when I heard he was doing it. And then I saw it and I was like, oh no, man, he's just like doing a kid's cereal commercial.
See, I actually never for a second, everybody was like, oh, Rob Zombie's Monsters. That's going to be like, why him? He makes everything I'm like, The dude, you don't understand Rob Zombie then. Dude loves the Munsters. He
Yep.
loves Texas Chainsaw and Grindcore, and he loves the Munsters. No one would let him make a Texas Chainsaw movie, so he just made every other movie he made like a Texas Chainsaw movie. But somebody let him make a Munsters movie, and he was like, I want to make this like a Munsters.
I say, as the person who is still going through the Texas Chainsaw reviews with our friend Nick and stuff, I don't know how he didn't get to make one. Everyone else seemed to get to after a while,
Yep.
especially some of those later ones, man. Woo.
Yeah.
Well, once your franchise hits Marcus Nicebill of U5, he's U571, right? He's not the other one.
Yeah, no, he didn't do U571. That's Jonathan Mostow. So
He did the other one then. He did the other submarine
Yeah.
movie. But once you
Yeah.
have a guy that does a submarine movie, do your there's no coming back from that. Like that's your franchise is peaked with Plus I feel like a lot of the reason why he didn't is I feel like maybe there's some sort of personal animosity between him and Michael Bay. Because they're two of the most like maximalist filmmakers that you've ever seen, but they both go in such opposite directions from each other that you know the vibes are bad.
Yeah, it is weird to watch like Nispel's take on things and what he's done, because I mean he made that really wacky Frankenstein TV movie. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's worth digging up. And then he made the terrible Conan the Barbarian remake, which isn't his fault because he didn't write it, but that's a horrible, horrible film. But he did the Friday the 13th, 2009, which is like, as we were talking about offline, Matt, is like the greatest hits of Friday the 13th. You know, if you don't want to watch an old Friday the 13th movie, that's probably the best thing you'll ever get, because God, they'll never make another one. They can't get it together enough to do it. No. But between that and all the music videos he did, I mean, he's also responsible for CC Music Factory. For us thinking they were hot people who worked out instead of just middle-aged people in a studio. But that's what the guy does. So I mean, I don't know how you get back to Jordan Peele from Marcus Nispel, but here we go. So Jordan Peele, on the other hand, is a guy who has proven that he can make hits out of small budget things. Get Out didn't have a lot of money behind it and really got everybody to kind of work for almost nothing on it. He did the Blumhouse thing, which is we'll pay you in points on the other side, right. And a lot of people will do that. Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga will tell you right now that works out pretty good for you. So, it's not a bad deal. And, he got double the budget for this one. And you can see it. He got some, Lupita Nyong'o had been in things. People knew who she was. I think Winston Duke, people were starting to learn who he was. I can't remember if this
he didn't really hit big until Black Panther.
I was going to say, I think this is before Black Panther, but when I saw him in Black Panther, I was like, oh, it's the nerdy dad from Us, and so and then the Elizabeth Moss, I don't think had really this is before Handmaid's Tale and some of her other bigger stuff. She was just a character actor
before Invisible Man.
Yeah, Tim Heidecker had been in things, kind of always playing this same character, it seems like, and then the kids had been in stuff, but they weren't something that would draw people to it, and so he got people that, I know them from this, but they're not like, the star like Jamie Lee Curtis or something like that.
I feel like Tim Heidecker is one of those people who gets typecast because of his permanent double chin.
Yep.
And it's like, if you want a guy who's like kind of in shape, but also looks like a schlub, like Tim Heidecker is like your go-to.
Exactly.
He's got dad bod.
Yeah, he's permanent dad bod. So yeah, but like dad bod from like the guy you could tell in his 20s was in like a hardcore rock band and then graduated with his accounting degree and was like, oh damn, I got to get a real job now, and just the band never took off. So now at the company picnic when he's not wearing his long sleeves, people get to see his tattoos and like, who are you? And so that's who Tim Heidecker is. So, but again, the stars weren't what drew me to this. It was the fact that I loved Get Out. I thought Jordan Peele had some stuff going on, and then I saw this and I thought, this is a Funhouse Mirrors. What is this movie about? I had to know, and that brought me to the theater, like I said, and then twice, and then I've owned it, for years since. So it's going to be fun to get into, and I guess it's time to do the old plot summary for these things. So let me try to tell you what I think this movie's about. I'll just try to give you the straightest line as I can. On a beach trip with her family as a child, Adelaide wanders off and encounters a seemingly homeless man wearing a Jeremiah 11:11 placard outside a nearby funhouse. Inside, she encounters an exact doppelganger of herself. Terrified, she escapes but refuses to talk as her parents grow concerned and take her to therapy. Flash forward to President's Day, and Addie goes on a similar beach trip with her family. She's got a husband, Gabe, 12-year-old daughter, Zora, who hates track, 10-year-old son, Jason, who's constantly trying to get a magic trick to work that absolutely won't. And they're going there to cope with the death of the children's grandmother, but also to help Addie get over her long-term fear of going to the beach from her experience, something that nobody in her family knows about. Addie becomes more unnerved seeing a man brought into an ambulance, the same man that was wearing that placard year before but having been stabbed. And much more scary moments happen at the beach. The family finally settles down for the night, and Addie tells Gabe about her childhood trauma. The power goes off suddenly, and they realize there's another family standing in their driveway, an exact doppelganger family of them. Finally cornered in the living room, the Wilsons see this carbon copy family wearing red jumpsuits and holding scissors. And only one of them is actually able to speak, though. And there's several scary encounters, and lots of neighbors and even some annoying yuppie friends get killed. Finally, Addie makes her way back to that funhouse, chasing her son who was abducted in an underground labyrinth where she learns the truth. The underground isn't some hell dimension. It's an elaborate series of tunnels under the country where everyone's doppelgangers mirror the moves and lives of the above ground counterparts. An exact cloned copy without a soul, but still agency. And one of those, Red, Addie's copy, has developed the ability to speak and has, under her leadership, led this huge revolt for the tethered, as they call themselves, to now surface and take the place of their mirrors above. Addie managed to overpower Red in a fight and impels her with a fire poker, then retrieves her son, Jason, who was trapped beneath. And in a flashback, we get the final big twist. The Addie we've been watching the whole time is not Addie. It's the soulless doppelganger who replaced herself, choked Addie out, chained her to the bed, and went up and has lived life. And the Addie below with the damaged vocal cords was the one who plotted the revenge all along because she was the one to have concrete speech. And the film ends with a zoom out shot showing scores of red jumpsuit doppelgangers around the U.S. holding hands, kind of like Hands Across America, but way more violent, with rescue services and newscopters surveying it from above. And Addie promising her son, it's all going to go back to the way it always was. And credits roll. And that's about as straight a line as I can give you guys. There's a lot of moving back and forth in this.
Yeah. There's a lot of movement back and forth in this film. There's a lot of stabbing and a lot of stuff like that.
There's a lot of stuff. Yeah.
That's basically it.
For all of that, though, it's a very contained film. Like it's really 4 set pieces the whole time. You know, all of that I just described. I mean, it's a house and it's a beach and it's a house and it's a road and then it's that underground labyrinth.
There's a little bit of lake stuff in there.
Yeah, but not
stuff, you know.
Yeah, but and then the big sweeping shot at the end. And that's kind of it, you know. And that's one of the things about it. And I think the way to get into this is to just sort of talk through our characters here. And I gotta say, just from the get-go, the thing that when I come back to this movie, and I've probably seen it 5 or 6 times now in total, Lupita Nyong'o's performance in this as both Addie and Red,
is astounding,
dude. Well, I mean, again, she's great in everything. She's in a great little Hulu scary movie called Little Monsters. If you've never seen that, it's a good laugh. It's really good. She gets trapped on like a bus with like carnivorous children.
One of the Blumhouse Into the Dark.
Yes,
episodes, I believe.
Yes, she's incredible in it, and but I would watch her do anything. But she's so good in this because once you know the twist, you know, and we spoiled it to death here now, that she's not actually the quote real person. She's the soulless clone. Everything she does makes so much more sense. How absolutely cold and detached she is from everything around her. It's really, really astounding as a performance.
Yeah, it really is. And her turn is red. All the faces she makes is red. It was a trailer shot, the one where she's got her head in her hands and she does the thing with her fingers against her face and she's kind of drums her fingers against her face and her whole oh man, it had to have been such a pain in the ass to talk like
yeah,
you know, when she had to do all her lines in that damaged croaky voice, but she kills it. She's so good.
And special shout out to the Foley people.
Oh yeah.
for the noise that her fingers make on her skin. It's this great like spidery scrinkle
Yeah.
sound. I
The
don't know how else
sound
to
design
describe
in
it,
this
but like
movie is also like the music and the Foley work and everything's
Oh,
really good.
I put a lot of that to the fact that Jordan Peele grew up on the same kind of quote classic horror movies that we all watched, Psycho and Dial M for Murder and all that Alfred Hitchcock shit, where it was all kinds of noise. Like you watch Get Out, and that when
Mhm.
Kathleen Keener's turning that spoon in that little teacup, and the shink shink, it's that distinct
Yeah.
sound that a teaspoon makes when it hits porcelain, like that. He just loves that kind of thing because sound emits such an emotional response and anchor for us when we're watching a movie. And all the stuff in this movie has that just littered through it. I mean, the sounds of the fair, but how they're kind of distanced out, and stuff in
Yeah.
this. And even so, like the thing about it is you watch this character is there's something about the real Addie who becomes Red, the one we know is Red, even as a child, that's different than everyone else around her. Like you don't know what it is exactly, but she's obviously very sensory and she's paying attention. Her parents clearly don't get along. There's a lot of strife going on there and stuff like that. But she even seems kind of detached from all of it. And I didn't really catch that until this last time watching it, but it seemed like that's how that would be able to how you could pull something like that off. Like the
Yeah.
only difference between them was that
Well, and
Red didn't know how to talk.
they're the only two that registered each other's presence in
Mm-hmm.
their closeness to each other to because even Red to come out to go up the escalator was different. And I also want to give a shout out just real quick. I think there's a great, and I don't know, I assume this had to play into part of the development of this movie, but the quote that the film starts with about, there's X number of millions of miles of tunnels beneath the United States. Some of them are, mines, some of them are transit system, but X number millions of miles have no known purpose at all. And like that's a great place to start a horror movie. Like there's this many,
Mhm.
thousands of or millions of miles of tunnel that like nobody even knows what the hell they're even there for, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
I think that's part of the larger theme too, is that once you scratch the surface beneath things,
mhm.
like there's just so much underneath. It's just this big empty, and
Yeah.
nobody knows what it is.
And I guess we're gonna start coming back to I want to get back to Red and Lupita Nyong'o, but like anybody that acts against themselves, I imagine there's a whole real difficult process involved in that where you got to get the body double in and everything. But it ends with a whole beautiful ballet fight scene where Red is just like basically owning Addie at every turn because she moves so gracefully and Addie's just fighting like a beast to try and, save her son. And it's set to this incredible score, but like kudos to Lupita Nyong'o and the body double. But, because both of them having to learn both sets of choreography to go through that fight multiple times from both sides of it. So,
Yeah, well, I mean, even her outfit and just about visual cues of things, she gets blood. She's wearing this white shirt, and she
mhm,
just gets redder and bloodier throughout the movie, which is a tip
mhm.
to who she really is. Right? It's just slowly
Yeah.
coming out, but it's the visual film grammar of that is neat, and you don't know it the first time you see it, but as Mr. Plinkett said, your brain did, and
Mhm.
you pick it up as the more you watch it.
Right.
Feel like a lot of that disconnect kind of it all feels very heavily autism coded to me. My daughter's got autism. Um, so there'll be times where, she's there. I know she's listening. I know she's taking in input, but there's not much of a response facially, and she'll be staring off into the middle distance, but like I know she's absorbing everything I'm saying, but there's some there's processes going on in the background there that I don't fully comprehend. And I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of that, like her, um, and the little girl in the beginning of the movie, I don't think we ever see her talk.
Mm.
Does she talk at all?
She does. She does that one
Very
like when
little.
her
She
mom tries to
picks
get her to go
the
to the bathroom, and she's like, "I
Yeah.
don't need to go," but she talks like a little kid. Like she
and
doesn't
she
say
picks the
much.
Thriller shirt.
Yeah,
Hmm.
even though it scared her, when she watched it on TV. So
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to me too, as the
Mhm.
parent of a 5-year-old.
Well,
And
I
I
mean,
also
as a kid, you do that, right? Like not to cut you off, but I mean, like I remember like watching stuff like The Shining, and it scared the crap out of me. But I had to watch it again. I needed to see it again. You
Mm.
lean into that stuff because that's how you grow, right?
Yeah. I also wanted to because with Addie and Red, Red is the only tethered, or Red and Addie are the only tethered pair that we get to kind of understand what's going on. And I understand that Red, just to get into the whole idea of the tethered, where Red says they're human copies without a soul because they figured out how to copy the body but not the soul. I don't necessarily know as that's true. I don't know if that comes down to being true because once Red is out in the real world and living as Addie, she learns to talk.
Yeah.
She apparently loves her husband and she obviously very much loves her children. I think Red slash Addie, the one that ended up spending the rest of their life underground, only thinks of them as soulless because they have no one to teach them speak. They literally have no. They've learned nothing. They know nothing. They are soulless only in the way that they are copying the actions of the people above them
Mhm.
with no understanding, but they have no understanding because they've never been into the world and they've never learned from anybody.
Well, we need to talk about because it gets dropped and you can kind of forget it if you don't, you're not just really paying attention to this. That this is a fucking Philip K. Dick horror story, man. Like that, there's this government plot to clone everybody
Hmm.
so that we can have more workers, right?
To
But this is
control them,
also,
she says.
yeah, just to
No.
control them because this is also the plot of Alien Romulus. Spoiler alert. And so, like, that they would do that and then it didn't work, so they would just abandon it. But well, they're all here, but well, whatever, they'll figure it out because that is that not
Because
so America with
yeah,
inventions? Like we just
because
like, well, screw it.
they never even learn to cook.
No,
They eat everything down there raw
eat the rabbit
because
raw.
they eat
Yeah,
the raw rat. They have nobody to teach them. So
yeah.
I was thinking about it this last time because Red, like I said, Red drops the line about them being soulless, and I don't think they are. I think they're just people without direction, without knowledge, without, learning or understanding.
I think you're onto something there. Is that her assumption of them or assessment of them as being soulless or whatever is based surely on the fact that that's been her observation of it. But the truth is that they clearly do have the ability to learn and do things, but nobody invested any time in them. We just
Hmm.
forgot them. We just threw them away.
Hmm.
And to Ron's larger point too, that a lot of times, particularly in our history in this country, when it came to anything that got put into the broader term of mental illness or different ability or something like that, for a lot of time we just locked those people away and just forgot about them. And when now we know if you'll invest a little bit of energy and time, it's pretty capable and extraordinary folks in that area. And I think all of that is part of what Jordan Peele is trying to say in this movie.
Yeah, I agree.
It's really an interesting parable, I think, or really an interesting connection to make um between these, especially considering the time, the initial setting, 1986. That's not long after Ronald Reagan opened the doors to all the asylums and just pushed everybody out into the streets,
Yep.
as part of his mini budget chopping efforts that kind of
As many
made things worse for everyone.
one of his many getting them out of the asylums, great. Not getting them any sort of support after that, bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
out of the asylums, good. Thrown on the streets and left to fend for yourselves, not great.
Not
So,
not a great idea, but it is part. I mean, everything in that opening scene where it's that zoom in on that old television about the Hands Across America commercial,
Hmm.
which I do remember that movement, but we didn't participate in and didn't really know what it was about. But everything on the wall there. I mean, you've got The Right Stuff, which is, this big Americana movie about,
Well,
the
and
space race. You've got Chud sitting over
we
there at
can
beaches of that. All of that is telling you what this movie's about.
Yeah, and we can dig into more of the Hands Across America idea when we talk, because this movie I had never even considered until Ron brought it up, the idea that it's about or at least potentially about, or could be about, people that have mental illness slash different abilities, and anything like that. One of my initial readings, because Hands Across America is about, helping hunger and everything like that. One of my very initial readings is, boy, this movie could easily just be interpreted as about um, the way homeless, the housing problem in America, how we treat unhoused people, and how they are just, especially with lines, Red's line, we are American, who are
Yeah.
you? We are Americans. It's like, how many millions of people in this country do people literally just walk over every day simply because they live in the street, and don't even consider the fact that they're Americans and that they are, just people that apparently everybody, including their own government, has forgotten about and doesn't care to do anything about.
I mean, Bruce Hornsby's "That's the Way It Is." That song, that's what that song's about in a lot of ways. I mean, there's that
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
verse about it, and it's just, but it is an indictment of that. And I think that's definitely one reading you can get out of it. I do also think it's a little bit of shaming the charity idea, because if you know anything about Hands Across America, they raised like $31 million, but only 15 million of it actually went to
Oh yeah, yeah,
homeless
yeah. I'm
charity.
not, because I
You
also
know,
think there's other undertones going on in this movie.
yeah,
In terms of, you notice all their underground tunnels almost look like an empty shopping mall.
yeah, they
When
do.
we and you brought up something earlier about the idea of history, and it's like, um and exploiting people and everything like that. The tethered are, in our consumer culture, um depending on people that we don't see, don't think about, don't anything, just for the idea of consuming.
Mhm.
Like the tethered kind of living in a big underground shopping mall, living worse versions of life than
Yeah.
the people above ground living the American, quote unquote, American dream. um, says a lot, at least to me. It says a
Mhm.
lot about, capitalism, and depending on people in other places to make our goods in pretty terrible conditions a lot of the time, that we just kind of justify or don't even think about, to be
Yeah.
like, well, here we are. The idea of like, well, yeah, they're making, 10 cents an hour or whatever, but that's better than the other job that they could have, which would be, like being a prostitute for like 3 cents an hour or whatever, whatever the fuck. It's
Yeah.
like, um, so in that way, the film could also be about historically how we've had capitalism literally all the way back to slavery, basically. So,
Even pre, I mean, yeah, well, and that's a good transition into Gabe, the Gabe character, because the thing that we get from him, and Winston Duke is such an interesting actor, because by any human standards, he's a big man. He's
he's
six
so
five.
big.
He's built like a defensive end. But for Hollywood standards, that man is a giant. And he looks like it.
Yep.
But he plays such a goof,
Yeah.
too. Like he can be
Yeah.
so nerdy. And the thing that you learn about Gabe as you see him is that he's got a great life. He's done a lot of things. He went to Howard, which is like in the
Mhm.
Black Ivy League, which is a whole other thing too, because that only exists because they couldn't go to Harvard. But
Uh-huh.
Howard's an awesome school though, and you don't get out of Howard with it. You got great connections. He's obviously got a great job. We don't know what he does, but he makes pretty good money. He's driving a freaking Lexus and he buys a boat and he's got a lake house. But what is he doing? He's always complaining about
Nobody
his
cares about the boat, Dad.
yeah, but he's always complaining about his dumbass white friend who has another generator, has another car, right? I mean, he's always complaining about there's always something else. And that's
Mhm.
like an American dream consumerism thing, is that there's
Keep
never
up
any
with the
end to it. There's
keep
never
up with the
any,
Joneses.
yeah, but you never do. That's the whole point, is that
Well,
there's
and
no way to
also,
ever do it.
right, there's no way to ever do it, but also there's a lot in that he is trying to keep up, like you said, with his dumbass white friend. Like, and those
Yeah.
people, those characters. But you're right, Winston Duke in this movie, and he's really funny too. Like when the even during a moment that's pretty tense when the doppelganger family is out in
Yeah,
the
when he tries to go
driveway.
when he tries to act hood all of a sudden, and it's just can't do it. It's
Oh,
Vince,
y'all want to play? You all
right,
get y'all
yeah,
get go give me the baseball bat.
it sounded like a Peele skit to me. I was like, that's
It really did.
exactly, yeah,
But it's funny because the Winston Duke, his whole arc in the movie is to be the Bruce Campbell
yes,
character
yes,
because like he's getting the crap beat out of him. He's
Mhm.
hobbling around. He's mostly ineffectual. The few times he succeeds, it's a lot of it is dumb luck
Yeah.
and 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 his segments are so funny. They're like Three Stooges bits, but like
Yeah.
with a little twist at the end to because like even when Zora is fleeing the house and Umbra is chasing after her, you hear him in the background going, "Ah, oh man, no, don't, oh, stop it!"
Yeah, him and his
And
his
him
doppelganger
and his
Abraham are in a
doppelganger are still
fight.
like
Yeah,
fighting
He-
in the
yeah,
most hilarious fashion that possible. So it's like like that little titter of, "Oh, this is funny," but then it's also really when you see it actually happening, it's like, "Oh, this is not funny at all. This is kind of terrifying because
They're
it's
yeah.
two monsters. It's like Godzilla versus King Kong, but it's two Winston
yes,
Dukes beating each other with a bat."
Yeah,
yeah.
and finding him a body double must have not been easy.
I cannot imagine. Well, they probably wouldn't got a wrestler or something. I don't even know who it was, but I mean, what's funny about it is you're right. The way he ultimately takes out Abraham is there's a trick to the boat motor that you have to hit it a certain way to get it to restart that his doppelganger doesn't know entirely. So what does he do ultimately when he finally think he swam away from him and he didn't? And he's coming up behind him. He headbutts the damn thing to get it to
Mhm.
start, and it chews him up. A la
And
Jason Six.
that's kind of another thing about and that goes back to the tethered. Like the Abraham tethered knows enough to start beating on the motor, but he doesn't know why, and he doesn't know the spot. He just knows bang thing,
Right.
because in versus, uh the actual character knows just where to hit it. But also
Yeah.
he's speaking of funny, it is, horror movies, it's always good when they have a little bit of levity. He's got another scene when he's talking about, why don't we just set up some traps? Like, why don't we just stay here and set up some traps
Yeah.
and home alone the house? We're not gonna sit here and set up micro machines.
Yeah. And then the kids are like, what's
What's
home?
Home Alone? What are micro machine or no, what are micro machines? What's Home Alone?
Yeah. No, that's one of those great,
And it's
like,
even funnier because they're just surrounded by dead bodies.
right. Yeah. Which is the other thing. And I don't think we should lose the Sam Raiminess of that. I'm glad you brought Bruce Campbell up, Ron, because that scene, if anything, screamed Evil Dead 2 to me. Is that there's all this carnage lying around, and we're going to stop and have this kind of serious plan and plotting conversation in the middle of it. Like when they pan out, and you realize how much carnage is around them. I think
Mhm.
the beating the manga is even when like you want to ask Kitty and Josh, they're laying right here. Yeah, and I was like, oh, they kind of are. Ooh, that's gross.
Yep.
No, that the whole attack on the house is great because and we got to talk about that opposite scene where Red is kind of laying it all out, James Bond villain style for
Mm.
everybody. The unbelievable tears rolling down her face. I mean, just
Mm.
big streams while she's telling this story, and she's just gutting it out. And she talks about how you met this man and you loved him, but I just had to take this big oath because that was his tether. So that's the way it
Mm.
was. And you had this beautiful girl, and I gave birth to a monster, and you see Umbre over there just looking monstrous. And then you talk about the little boy who he
Pluto.
hasn't pulled his face up yet, but like, oh yeah, he's burned. He's all about fire. And
Yep.
it's so that scene and the way they set all up, there's so much of that tension that I think that's why they have to go into some of the Three Stooges stuff to kind of break it a little bit because it's
Yeah.
it's ramped up high right there.
It is, the whole break-in scene is really tense, really scary kind of stuff. And speaking, we were talking about Ombre, the girl there, the actress,
Shahada right.
Bahati Wright, thank you. She does a really good job of making that like small girl really scary.
Yeah, that look in her face. It's just that
Mhm.
wide-eyed look, and just you can just tell
Yeah.
like it's just evil going on
Mhm.
there, you know. But it's you talk about the horror of the break-in. You see what the real horror of the break-in probably was like for most everybody else in the world when you see the way Kitty and Josh's family get taken out, because they have the two twin daughters who are kind of shining ripoffs
Mhm.
themselves, and the way that their doppelgangers like slaughter them
Yeah.
is pretty awful. I mean,
Well,
it's
just the
horrendous.
moment when they appear
Yeah.
behind and he's just like,
Just
"Hello?" Like,
yeah, and it just cut throats and everything. I mean, it's punctuated by the good Alexa joke where she poor Elizabeth Moss is trying to tell Alexa to call the police and starts playing "Fuck the Police" by NWA,
the
which is
police.
because they did
Get the
Ophelia.
whole murder scene set to
Yeah,
NWA's "Fuck the
I
Police."
mean, yeah, but up to that moment, that's a horrific scene. It's one of the scarier things in this movie. And but again, I give Peele a lot of credit. He knows that there's that emotional connection between comedy and horror are not that different from each other, and you can have them both at the same time if you know how to play the joke right. And again, sketch comics know how to hit the joke. It's all about the moment, and you got to hit the button at the right minute.
Yeah. Yep. Can't have the I mean you can, but it doesn't necessarily work unless it's done really, really well. You can't have the tension the whole time.
Yeah,
Like,
it's hard to keep it ramped up the entire way without a little bit of levity, like you
yeah.
say. I mean, Ron, we talk about this on a lot of other movies and stuff too, and I'm sure you've seen this in a lot of the episodic television that you've had the review for the years. At some point, you got to give everybody a break, right? If for nothing more than just
Hmm.
exposition, but you've got to give people a break.
Yeah, there's you 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 if you have build and you never get to the blow off, people start turning against you. People start turning against whatever it is you're trying to set up for your eventual blow off. So you got to have those little built-in, it's like what's easier, climbing a mountain or climbing up 50 feet, hitting a plateau, climbing another 50 feet, hitting a plateau, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
what's better, running a marathon or like walking a marathon where you run for bursts and walk for bursts and then
hmm
you're still going to the same distance, but one's a whole lot more arduous and the other is like, well, I could stop and take a breath and drink some water and just kind of chill and keep making the progress, keep staying in the state that I need to stay in to do this thing that I'm doing, but not like exhaust every myself or in this case the audience in the process.
yeah. Because you're right. At some point, people are just going to be they don't have anything left to give as an audience member to this, so you got to give them the breaks, you give them the humor, and they give it to the right people. I think Lupita Nyong'o probably can be funny. I don't know that I've ever really seen her be funny on purpose, but they give the comedy to Winston Duke to do because he can do Bruce Campbell, and all that stuff, and then they let the kids be actual kids, and that's a hard thing to do in a horror movie, because a lot of times you got to like trick the kid. I think these kids knew exactly what they were in,
Yeah.
and they set up so much stuff when the two boys are in the closet and they're learn about the one with the match and the fire, and the other kid's trying to he realizes like, oh, he'll do exactly what I move, just in opposites. That's how I'm going to escape. I'm going to kick the door closed on him the way my sister does, all the little stuff they set up, but it works out the way kids think. The other girl's like, I can outrun this chick, and
Yeah.
I know how to distract her and get away, and when she jumps off the car and kills the neighbor and stuff, that there's a lot of smart but normal smart people doing stuff. They don't
Mhm.
have to become the Avengers all of a sudden. They just using their wits, which is
And
makes it
and
fun.
and that does, again, we keep going back to this idea from the beginning of like they aren't soulless, and even though they are called the tethered, they don't have to be, because you know Ombre does jump off the car, literally goes for the neighbor instead of running after Zora in a mime of what Zora's doing, the running. She makes a conscious of her own will decision to jump off and murder that dude. And, they all of them essentially become untethered the minute they are above ground and doing all these
Mm-hmm.
things. They're not miming against, against matching movements anymore. They're doing their own things.
Well,
So
and that's why this plays so interesting. And I wanted to throw it to y'all to see how you thought about this. So if in the metaphor side of things, Jordan Peele saying, if people that we just forgot about or whatever, if we gave them a chance and got them out, they wouldn't just automatically be the mirror image soulless nothings that we think they are or whatever. But on the other hand, they all become horrible monsters, which is also the great fear of like, that's why we can't let these people up, because this is what happens. And I mean,
but they're leading a revolution, right?
right.
They're not necessarily, I mean, they're not necessarily horrible monsters. They are fighting, at least to them, they are fighting a war against oppression.
That's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of it like that, because I thought he was trying to play it both ways for us. But you're making a much more interesting point now with that, Matt.
I feel like that
yeah.
Red's whole thing was she set them up. What I got from
She
her
set them
explanation
free.
was she set them up. She set them free to break their chains. And again, going back to the idea of slavery, break their chains and rise up against the masters, or some sort of revolution. What they're doing is they're not necessarily, and forming the chain across America, sort of symbolically of whatever, together we can build a better America, or whatever the frick the phrase was. It's not that they're horrible monsters, it's that they're revolutionaries.
It's a pretty thin like line between the horrible monster and the revolutionary when you're the
Yeah.
person being revolted against.
That's true.
Yep.
Yeah, ask the British what they think of George
Yep.
Washington. Not exactly fans.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and
Yeah,
it
like
gets
when
even worse. Like, I mean, people, it gets even worse when you're talking about, because we didn't necessarily go over there and kill all the British, but like think of Italy at the end of World War II, when they were
right.
literally stringing up Benito Mussolini's
I
corpse
mean,
to spit on him.
think about the French and the Germans in trench warfare in World War One. The hell that escape that was. Yeah, I think you're making those are good points, and I agree with that reading of this. And again, I think that's part of the fun of this, is that the more you pick at the threads of it, it gets a little bit bigger, the tapestry gets wider, it becomes a little bit deeper. I mean, you can really think the first one that gets loose or gets free is the sign holding guy's tether, because we see him dead, and then we see Jason see his bloody doppelganger on the beach. That's because you can look real close, you can see his red jumpsuit underneath his big coat, and he's got a bloody hand, and he's holding up that sign. And I'm sure Jordan Peele just searched for, like, I need verses that are like all lined up. So you went through 10:10 to 11:11 to whatever to find it. But that verse is pretty bleak. Therefore this is what the Lord says: I'm going to bring calamity upon them, and they will not escape. They'll beg for mercy, and I will not hear their cries. And
God is a dick.
But that moment, though, the thing about that is, that's the one thing about this movie that I don't think entirely works. And I don't know that they needed it, like the numerology and all of that stuff in the verse, because it doesn't really tie into anything, because at no point do Addie and Gabe and Zora and Jason cry out for anybody else's help but their own. You know what I mean?
It never even occurred to me to look up what it actually was. It may have it obviously occurred to you and probably other people. I just, I thought it was Austin 3:16, I just whooped your ass, it might as well have been that.
It more or less says that, but
I thought it was just a sign in the movie that the guy was holding, because, random people do hold random crazies do hold Bible verses up,
Right,
So,
right. But that's what I'm saying, is that it's part of it that doesn't work for me, because the message of that is that, oh, you're going to get what God is saying to the Israelites there in that verse. The context of it is like, they've gotten so wicked that I'm going to turn them over to it and just let them have it. And they're going to what's coming to them, and I'm not going to listen. I'm going to let you eat your punishment or whatever, as Old Testament.
I don't know if we're coming back to the idea that the tethered are revolutionaries, then
maybe that is it. But what I'm saying is that our protagonists don't cry out for help to anybody. They don't call. I mean, they call the cops, but they're like, that ain't going to work, and they just rely on their own self-reliance. So I don't know. That is the one nitpick about this movie. I'm really going to stick a fork in, because I feel like it is unnecessary. Ron,
Sure.
what do you think?
Well, they do try to call the cops, as we mentioned. They do try to go across the pond to get help from their neighbors, only to find their neighbors dead. It seems like at every turn they're like reaching out. They're attempting to find someone who can help them, or some way to get to help them, some way to get help for themselves. But they are let down by the very system that created the tethered. Like the same decision makers who like put the tether together didn't, clean up the mess, so to speak. Um, and so now we've got these people who are faced with these what they see as killers coming after them, and the very systems of power that they have depended on to keep themselves separate from people like the tethered have abandoned them in their time of need. As we see, there's not like a line of police advancing on the Hands Across America chain. They're
No.
watching it from the safety of helicopters at the end of the movie. There's
Yeah.
not like there's no like where's the army, where's the where's the National Guard, where are the cops, where are the paramedics? The only paramedics we see are probably dead. We don't
And
see any cops at all.
yeah, and in general, it is interesting you say that, Ron, because even there's a point in the movie where the television news reporter is reporting on it, and he's like peeking out from like behind an ambulance, I believe, and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so if even the ambulance drivers are being attacked, and when you think about this, it because I had the thought earlier, I was like, how did all these tethered so easily overpower so many people? And I think it just comes down to shock. Like if I literally saw myself running at me with a pair of scissors, I would think I was having a stroke. Like I literally would not know they had a big element of surprise on their hands, which is the calamity in that verse of like all these people seeing themselves running at them. It's so I don't know.
And it seems to have happened at night when people are the most vulnerable and most unable to, comprehend high strangeness as it happens around them. Like there's a reason like nobody gets abducted by a UFO in broad daylight, right? It always happens in the middle of the night. There's a reason, there's a reason nothing good ever happens after midnight.
Yeah.
That's when all the weirdos turn crazy. And that's when people who are otherwise not like predisposed to those sorts of behaviors, or who in the cold light of day would make different choices, end up making poor choices and dangerous choices. And in some cases, you're probably, tired and a little drunk, because clearly I think the Tim Heidecker character was very much gone by this point.
Yeah.
He's too drunk to defend himself against himself.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and you make a good point too about just the lowering of defenses and stuff. And it goes back to their grand leader who's doing all of this came from that world. So who better to know it? Like somebody who really saw it and wasn't just mimicking it, but she had lived in the light and the dark. And so, and what we hear about her is that it was when they got the girl that they thought was Addie. Part of the therapy they make her go through is like, let's do art therapy, which is a great tool, especially for children a lot of times. And she leaned into dance, and we find out like, oh, her and Elizabeth Moss are on the beach talking about, did you ever wish you kept dancing? Oh, maybe, sometimes, but not that much. But what you realize is that through dance is how she kind of worked through her trauma, and the trauma of, I've never been around people like normal people before. How do I do this? And learn how to talk and all that kind of stuff. The one down below was the one that was really dancing, and stuff like that. So they had like this reverse moment. It's a great scene. And again, you get these two girls, in the same girl just playing the same role in two different scenarios, but you watch how everybody just automatically deifies her because she's doing something that no one else can do. She's moving on her own because there's no way for them to have ever seen anything like that. And you get the idea of like, that's how she started planning and building for them, and it took years of just how did they get the red jumpsuits? Don't know, doesn't matter. How did they come across the scissors? Seems to be the only thing they have down there. Scissors and rabbits, and scissors and rabbits all the way sounds like a great punk band, by the way. I just want to say that. and could be a hell of an opening act for like Daisy Grenade or something like that, but who are awesome. You should listen to them. But anyway, you see that sort of come together, and this is the thing about this movie that I really just get off on, is that Jordan Peele understands the idea of show don't tell. Like you can tell a lot, but you can do a whole lot with just a few images, right? And it's all through the cinematography and that score and everything that he's got going on here that just really, it was such a jump up from Get Out, which is very much an in your face, straightforward, will tell you what it is movie, and there's some cool visuals in that. But this is just on a different level for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, like you said, it's a movie where getting too caught up in the details would bog everything down. Like you said, where the red jumpsuits come from doesn't matter. Who cares? Where those little leather gloves come from doesn't matter.
I think that's a Thriller ripoff. I think that's like a Michael Jackson thing.
Kind of,
okay,
yeah.
It's sort of. I think it's an homage to that, if anything.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter. This is this is a story of, like you said, you can get a lot out of just images. There's she's got chalkboards down there that she's drawn some plans on, and you can see that they've been working on this probably since she was a little girl. And
you figure it's been what, 25 years? She's
like
supposed to be in her mid 30s, late
Yep.
30s, so maybe 30 years has gone by. So she was 8 and now she's 35, or
Yep.
Whatever. Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a long time to build something up, and I don't know. It's neat to think about that, and that's one of the things about this movie that's kind of fun, is if you just take it on its just watching it surface, it's wild, because I mean it doesn't take long to get into it, and then you're on a chase, for an hour in this thing before it ever slows down again. And I love how each of the characters has to take out their own doppelganger ultimately. We talked about how Gabe took out Abraham with the boat, right? And Zora took out Umbre by driving over her and basically throwing her into a tree where she got impaled, and stuff like that. But the way Jason takes out Pluto is one of the scariest, like, talk about a Rob Zombie music video, that I've ever seen, when he figures out, if I just start walking backward, this kid, before he throws the match and blows us all to hell, is going to walk back into the car that's already on fire. Like, how he figured that was freaky, man. When he puts the scary Wolfman mask down and does it, that was wild.
That kid, there's something going on at the end of the movie with that kid. I don't quite know. He
knows. He knows his mom was the one. I think he figured out.
He must have.
I think he's figured it out. Yeah.
I think he knows. Yeah. And that's why, and when she says everything's going to go back just the way it was, and he just puts the mask down, like, I think that's it.
But does it matter? But that's the other thing. He's figured it out, but ultimately doesn't matter, because she's always been his mom.
I think that's the point, is that does it ever really change?
Every little thing is going to be all right.
Yeah, right. But to when the way he kills the Pluto kid, by basically making him walk into the fire, that was messed up.
And hands down, I don't know if that kid had a body double under the mask the entire time or whatever. The movement on that kid, or that very small adult, was incredible.
Yeah, it was really, really well done.
I feel like that the way Pluto's moving, it almost has to be an actual child.
Yeah. I feel like that. See, I didn't look it up, but I feel like that whole fire thing has got to be CGI. Like that they just had the kid walk back, and it's all superimposed. It's
gotta be, yeah.
But
or in that one, it could be a person in a suit, because he's far enough. They're far enough away that you don't see the details, and they're just
it could
walking
be
backwards with their hands out. They're not moving creepily. I don't know. Just watching the Pluto move around, especially on the all fours, it's like, that's a young person's knees. That's not the knees of a 30-year-old stuntman.
That is not someone that's run a few miles, as you were talking about earlier, Ron. You would feel that. You're not moving around that way.
No.
But no, just like watching my own child do things that would leave me in traction. Those little people are just made of like rubber and aggression.
You
It's
are. You are
crazy.
you are made out of energy and rubber when you're younger, and that's how you can bounce back from injury so fast. I mean, believe me, I know. I did a lot of it to myself, and now I think, I sneeze hard and my back hurts, for 2 days. I can't recover as fast. But it's a great moment. But I got to tell you, when the way the red character is hiding in the shadows of that other car and just kind of scampers out there and takes him, in that moment.
Mhm.
And that was a scary moment, and only to lead us into the. I love how you called it, Matt, the abandoned shopping mall, because it's exactly what it looks like.
Yeah.
And when we get that that unreal idea of taking, I got 5 on it, the Luna's just dope track as it is, and turning it into this Bernard Herrmann John Carpenter thing. What a great idea. And apparently that was just something for the trailer that like a marketing guy and the editor came up with, and they did, and test audiences were so jazzed about it, Jordan Peele went and recut it back into the movie because it wasn't in the ending. They had a different score, and he cut the fight scene back around it at the end. And I'm like, well,
It works out so great too.
it's so creepy, isn't it? That's just a great move.
Mhm.
It's easy to like crap on these studio executives for interfering or whatever, and like not being creatives, interfering with the work of a creative. But sometimes some of these people are actually very creative
Yeah.
and deserve a little credit for their contributions to the movie, because that
Mhm.
that is one of the best. Like that's the best thing about the movie soundtrack is working that back end and rearranging it to make it like to turn this like nothing
It's a
90s.
happy song. I mean, it's a song about smoking weed at a party. Okay, this would be real. And they're playing. What's funny is it's been dropped in the movie because the parents are like, "Oh hell yeah, that was our jam in college or whatever." And the kids are like, "This is a song about drugs. I thought drugs were
What's
bad."
guy got 5 on it mean? It's about drugs. No, it's not about
it's a dope.
drugs.
It's not a drug song. It's a
Dope
dope song.
song.
Drugs are bad. And then like get on the beat, But it's a party song. Is the whole idea. It's a party song, and and if you even listen to the lyrics of it, it's a party song in a lot of ways. But to take that and turn it into this horror anthem, what a great idea. I mean, and
Yep.
like you say, it seems like it's been done to death now. Everybody's sort of copied it. But Joe West, Joe Weiss, the creative guy at Universal, and the trailer editor, John Cantu, I looked up their names, were the ones that came up with that. And they deserve to be called out and given credit for that, because it's a cool idea. But even beyond just being cool, that sample, which is like 3 different songs at once. I think Jungle Boogie's in there and a couple other things. And they when you hit it with strings and you slow it down like that, it still has such great impact. And to cut that, like you called it, Matt, that ballerina fight scene that Addie and Red have at the end, the scissors versus the fire poker. It's awesome. And that fight is amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
The thing I like most about the fight is you can really see Addie's veneer of civilized personage fall away, and she becomes more and more. She fights more and more like a tethered, as we see them throughout the movie. Animalistic, violent, just straight ahead, stabbity stab, and Red kind of re-embraces her humanity because she's like dodging, she's moving, she's doing all these crisp movements and thinking ahead and planning and stuff that we don't see the other tethered performing. So it's like they're both slipping back into their roles, and I feel that's why Addie absolutely has to kill Red or else.
Exactly. And when she does, I mean, she runs her through that fire poker and then breaks her neck because her hands have been handcuffed in these chains this whole time. And we'll find out where the chains that, you were used to change the girl to the bed when she swapped places with her years before. She kills her in such a violent, personal way. I mean, it's very visceral to see that happen.
Yeah, and she's just screaming the whole time doing it too. So yeah.
But then
forget Hands Across America. That's more like Hands Across the Throat.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, you know what though? Like I was watching this and I'm going, That's the last time I watched a choreography fight like that I just really got off on that I thought was really cool. I'm like, Buffy was full of those. I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer. A lot of those fights were that way. Some of the big ones in particular were really well done. But the one that popped in my head watching it this time, guys, was the Duel of the Fates from the Phantom Menace. And I was like, I bet Jordan Peele likes that.
Nothing wrong with it. I mean, yeah, you're right. You're not wrong.
I mean, it feels a lot like that. But what's wild, and I think I'm glad you called that out, Ron, that she sort of becomes her old tethered self again when she opens the locker door and she sees her son there. She's automatically back to mom zone, my baby, and she's like, it's gonna be okay, it's fine, I'm here, saying everything a mom would say, right? And the way he is looking at her, I mean, obviously he just saw her kill somebody, so he's seen a lot of people get killed tonight, so there's that trauma. But he just saw his mom really kill somebody. I think in that moment he realized, nope, she was the one down here. Like he knows then.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably true. I hadn't really thought of it that way, that's where he got the realization. I kind of had a wonder of what Red might have said to him, but the way you just described it actually does make a lot of sense.
I just kind of feel like he saw it all, and then when they're back in that ambulance, they reunite with Gabe and Zora, who've been kind of hiding out in that ambulance, and they're driving away, and she's just like, everything's gonna be fine. It's gonna be just like it was, all that stuff. And he's just looking at her like, uh-huh. And he just puts that mask down on his face. It was like,
Yep. Yeah.
Oh man, there's a lot going on in that. I mean, it really is. And then to pan out into that big shot again, where's the cavalry watching from above? Like, let's let that sort itself out, And so, or as in corporate parlance, we just fixed the glitch, and just let Milton burn the place down, and then we move on. But I mean, really, that's the response you would expect. And it's either that or it's the Alien versus Predator Requiem answer, which is just to nuke it from orbit, which is probably the next thing that happened in the next scene that we didn't see. But I don't know. It's such a wild climax to get to that point, because again, this movie's been a ride the whole way, and it ends in a real violent personal moment, but then to end on almost a joke is, I don't know, it's a mood.
Now, is it a joke or is it more like unsettling because this many people have been killed and replaced by their doppelganger?
I think it's like that macabre joke, the idea of like the aristocrats with a lot of blood.
Maybe.
I mean, really, it could go a lot of ways. But then let me ask y'all, like, how do you read the ending? I told you how I read it. I read it as a big macabre joke.
Well, my reading on the ending is, where are they? Is America the only place that's done this experiment? That's the first question.
I kind of feel like, yeah, because it's so localized to America, and the whole setup with the opening text was about America. I think so.
Now, was it just the United States or was it just California? That's another question.
Yeah, that is excellent question.
And of course, the third question is, there's no way Mexico's going to let anybody across the border with this kind of stuff going on.
Hell
right
no.
on the other side.
No, right.
They're going to drive to the border, and it's going to be like the machine gun scene in Sicario. The Mexican troopers are just going to come swarming out of the cars and just start gunning them down.
Yeah,
like there's no.
It's still like the end of Bonnie and Clyde. So yeah,
it'll be like Sonny Corleone at the
the turnstile. Yeah,
I do feel like though it's I don't know, is it? I'm kind of where Ron is. Is it a joke or is it? I don't quite know how to read the end. It seems a little bleak. The idea that they're all just hanging out up there, and it seems like they're just stretching this chain and meeting no kind of resistance, So I guess I kind of read it as a little bleak. Like they're driving away, and who knows what comes next, but it might not be good.
It gives me a lot of In the Mouth of Madness.
Yes.
Kind of vibes, in the sense that, like, is this just an isolated incident, or is everybody screwed in it? It feels like everybody's screwed. And this,
well, that's
this really kind of feels like George Carpenter. Jordan Peele's John Carpenter moment.
No, I agree 100%. I'll tell you the thing I had at the ending, guys. I feel like it's the ending of The Thing. we're just gonna sit here for a little while.
Mm.
It's
Yep, the
like,
ending of The Thing, or
yeah,
the novella ending of The Mist, not the
yeah,
film ending of The Mist, but the novella ending where they just kind of do drive off into the mist in hopes that maybe they'll drive out of it or find help, you
yeah.
know.
Well, and to Ron's point, you don't know how far this goes. It could be anything, but the In the Mouth of Madness ending is a good pull. I hadn't thought about that movie in a long time, but I love that movie because of its weird, almost bleak ending. But it's also like John Trent, that character, ends cackling his head off. It's a great Sam Neill performance, by the way. Just cackling his head off, because what else can you do at that point? You just laugh, because
Yeah.
it's just absurd. But it's not so absurd that you're like, that's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. But it's absurd enough that you're like, oh God, that's just scary enough to work, right?
It's
Yeah.
unsettling.
Yes, very much so. So I mean, there's ends of horror movies all the time where things get beheaded or blown up or whatever. Everybody's just kind of left there going like, okay, you get the mop and I'll get the trash can. We have to start cleaning up, the falls that the gremlins have destroyed and all this
I
stuff,
always wonder about the after of a horror movie. It's
right?
like, I
Yeah.
always do. It's like, oh, you
Mhm.
show up and you're like, a lot of friggin' dead people here. Oh, it was you had a ghost, huh? Oh, what the demon? What was that? Oh, sure. Uh-huh.
It, it's the same ending as, and I don't think this is a mistake either, because so much of this is shot in Santa Monica, Santa Cruz, all that stuff. It's the same ending as the Lost
The
Boys.
Lost. Jay,
Yes.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I was sitting here after I got done watching the movie. I was like, "There's one thing I can't stand about living in Santa Cruz: all the goddamn doppelgangers."
Yes. Exactly. And I think this is an homage to that. Because that last shot of Jason Patrick and Corey Haim looking at their grandfather, and it just cuts to black, and people are strange. I'm like, that's this movie. I think Jordan Peele is paying homage to that.
Could be.
It's a neat way to read it. And again, it's one of these things that we try to talk about, like, what's the lasting influence of this movie? I don't know. It's an homage to 50 things that came before, but there's nothing been made like it since. So it's
That's
its own little thing.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. It is fairly unique in what it is. And people talk about, oh, this movie is too much like that movie, or where are all the fucking original movies in cinema these days? There aren't any. Everything is pulling from things that came before it. And obviously this is pulling from a lot of different stuff, including from some Twilight Zone, some old school Twilight Zone.
Very much.
But there's also taking all those influences and making something that is interesting and unique. And that's what Jordan Peele did with this film. And he created, something that has some genuinely really creepy moments in it and some really fun moments in it, for levity's sake. And then at the end of the day, you go, I don't 100% know what that was about. I've got some ideas, but I know I liked it.
Yeah.
The
And
the Twilight Zone episode was Mirror Image, by the way.
Thank you.
It's one of the better ones.
Yes.
nice.
It took me a minute to remember the title, but like it shouldn't have, because
I
it
mean,
does
obviously,
what it says on the tin.
obviously that's something that's big for Jordan Peele, because they handed it to him, after Get Out in this, and he's been kind of running the newer versions of the Twilight Zone. I
Well,
guess
he did for like a
Plus.
season or two, and I
Yeah,
don't think it ever came back.
I don't think it did. It didn't last long,
It
but I
wasn't
could see why they would want to
great.
give it to him, because it does
Yeah.
fit in his wheelhouse a little bit. So,
Yeah. The
um,
ones I saw weren't great. I think the fault of the ones I saw that I could tell was that they were just too long. Like they
mm,
were one of the part of the reason the Twilight Zone works is you're in and you're out. It's
mhm.
it's a half-hour program, and it didn't quite work in the hour for. At least I didn't think it quite worked in the hour format the way that it should have.
there's that fine line on a show like that where you either need to get in and get out and leave people wondering or scared or relieved or whatever, or if it goes on too long, then now you've left me with a third act that doesn't exist. So what happened? Like I've invested that time. I'm with you. It's hard to do that over an hour for a show
Yeah.
like that. And not that it can't be done. Some of those in the dark Hulu things that we referenced earlier go on about 20 minutes too long, and some of them I feel like are about 10 minutes too short. They're good exercises and ideas,
Short
and
format is always tricky,
yeah. But some of them really do work. Again, like I referenced Little Monsters, and I would strongly recommend that. It's a great get in, get out, doesn't waste time. It's real contained, and that's one of the things about this movie that works too. So I guess we're rounding right through it, but we're in final thoughts and popcorn ratings. So
Well, before you get to the final
yep,
thoughts, Jay,
yep.
to remind you, Get Out is not the movie we're talking about. You keep, I'm making a joke because you keep saying get in, get out, get out, get out, and then I have to
This is
explain my
true.
joke because I don't want people on the internet to say he's still talking stupid ass. No, I know what he's saying. I'm making a joke. It's called comedy.
Yes,
I'm bad at it, but I'm trying.
no, I appreciate that because in my head I was going, did I just say get out for the last hour and a half? So just possible because who knows? But I do know we're at the part of the podcast where it's time to give final thoughts and popcorn ratings. So Bat, since you're new to the show, and for those maybe your podcast can be there first. Sometimes we rate things on a popcorn scale. The bigger the popcorn and the more you add to it, the more you like it, or vice versa as well. So what are your guys for us, Matt? Let's start with you.
All right. Well, my final thoughts is I think I've made it pretty clear. I really like this movie. I don't watch it a ton, necessarily simply because it's I'm not always in the mood for a thinker like this one, but every time I do watch it, I do enjoy it. And I think it's really well made. I think it looks great. I think I think all in all, top to bottom, it's a really well put together movie. So in terms of your guys' weird ass popcorn rating, I don't understand why you guys are always talking about. I'm a very I don't understand why you're always throwing shit on your popcorn and talking about burnt kernels and all that other crap. It's overcomplicated for me, so I'm just gonna say for me, this one is a big old extra large popcorn, and I guess uh, I don't know, just popcorn. I don't, that's all I know how to say about that.
Ron.
Well, that's fair, man. I feel like at some point the the possibility of adding things onto the popcorn was added probably by me because of my inability to stick to any kind of formatting. There's a lot to like about this movie. Lupita Nyong'o is like carrying this movie through the first like half an hour, which I found to be a little bit slow, at least on this watch or on first watch. But I feel like later on there's going to be when I watch it again, and I will, there's going to be things that I see in there that I didn't see the first time around, and that's going to be a really rewarding journey. And I feel like there's also going to be some little hints and tips that uh, the result of the Eddie Adelaide not being Adelaide is going to be more obvious as we watch, as you see how she interacts with people, as you watch the mask slip on and slip off, so to speak. But yeah, got good Sam Raimi vibes off of it, got good John Carpenter vibes off of it, without it feeling like an overt ripoff of anything Carpenter or Raimi have done. Um, it's clearly got stuff to say. I feel like there's a lot that we've been able to unpack throughout the show, and it's things that are going to color my future watches of the movie. Um, so I thought it was great. I thought it was not perfect, but not perfect, not flawless, but like definitely a very satisfying large popcorn uh, with garlic salt. Let's do some garlic salt to give it a little bit of funk, and also because Matt complained about the popcorn rating system, so
Just
now I
when it
have
comes
to add
down,
stuff to
what
my
it comes
popcorn.
down to me is like if you're adding stuff onto it, doesn't that just mean you like it more? So you just go up a size, and so that's my thing. But
Well,
Sometimes you go higher,
sometimes an extra large popcorn is too much. Sometimes you just want a large popcorn, but
okay,
you want
okay,
some put some
I
put some
I can
garlic on it.
I trust you. I just, despite the fact that I've been talking about metaphors and shit this entire podcast, I'm actually not all that smart, and sometimes I need things to be very simple and explained to me in very basic terms.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because this movie is anything but simple and basic, and
No, I said.
I think that's what I like about it is, and I'm like you, I don't always want that, but when I do, I'm going to be picky about where I go get it from because sometimes I see so many movies try this and just absolutely face plant on it because they don't know how to set it up and pay it off, and there's missteps along the way, and art's hard to make. I realize a lot of people get involved in stuff. You never know who's is really doing what, but Jordan Peele definitely is somebody who has a vision. And the hardest thing in the world to do when you have a hit is to come back and have another one. Like the sophomore slump of rock albums is its own show. We could talk about forever. You think about great second albums. There aren't that many because I mean, as Hootie and the Blowfish once said, we had our whole lives to write Crack Review. It took us 20 years to get it, signed, and then we had 2 years to write that again. And he said, and as you see, Fairweather Johnson's what you get when you have 2 years to write your life again. And while I like some of it, and sometimes I like a second album, whatever, there is a hard act to follow, particularly when your first one is so well revered and
Sure.
people expect so much from you. And what I love
John
about
Carpenter
Jordan,
did make Halloween 2 after Halloween.
yeah, and he will tell you the worst idea he ever had was because he was drunk and couldn't come up with anything better to do.
Yep.
Fine, she's his brother, whatever. And to that point, which is something I happen to think is great, but I know he didn't like it, and obviously they've moved away from it now. But for Jordan Peele to come back with a second act and go, okay, now I'm going to do something different. And then he did it again with Nope. He's just done a different movie every time he's been out. And I'm thrilled to see what the next chapter is for the guy because I feel like he's got all the influences in the world. So he's an archivist, right? He's in a lot of ways what Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson were when they partnered for Scream. Craven had been in the game for a long time, and Kevin Williamson grew up on all those horror movies. And so, okay, how can I basically remake Halloween, but with smart ass kids in the 90s? Cool. And that's what Scream is, and it works, right? It totally works for that. And I feel like Jordan Peele is kind of running in that same level, but his stuff is so well done. And again, he's got a lot of good artists working with him that just bring a lot to the table. And when you bring a cast in who clearly gets what they're supposed to do, I mean, everybody here really nails it. But Lupita Nyong'o is not only the anchor for the first 30 minutes of the movie, she's the anchor of the whole movie for me. I mean, I just watch her do this performance and it's so nuanced. And I'm glad to hear, Ron, you say you'll want to go back to it again because I think you get so much more out of it watching her unpack this for you. And it's got to be a fun thing as an actor to know the secret that nobody else is going to get on until the last second, and then they can go back and watch you go like, oh God, you were telling us
Even
the
the
whole
little
time.
kid that plays, Addie, and even people tend to complain about kid actors and everything. Even the kid that, because we talked about this kid that played Pluto / Jason, like
Gabe's good.
kid's really good for his age, so.
It's, I mean, again, it's the sign of a director who's fully in control of what he's got here, and that's why this one is one that I immediately loved it when I saw it, and it's still my favorite thing Jordan Peele's done. If I had to rank all of his films, I'd do this, Nope, and Get Out, and just on my own personal level. But I think this one stands way above, and it's just a great thing. And I hope it's something he never touches again. I hope it's just it is that he just does these standalones and they just kind of live in their own little world. I think that's what's fun. So it's extra large popcorn for me as well. And I'll just do the standard butter. That's all I want. But I'm going to layer it, Matt, because this is a layered movie. So I'm going to put,
There you go.
a third of it in butter, third of it in butter. Get on the top.
I'm going to officially change my popcorn rating. I don't think I've ever done this before. But I'm going to
Oh,
go from a large with extra butter to just an extra large popcorn. You've talked me into it.
all right. See,
right,
the
cool.
power of influence compels you.
It is one that's worth a rewatch. It is,
Yeah.
some films really reward a second or third viewing, and this is absolutely one of them because, like I said at the beginning, for as good as Get Out is, it's a movie that it's about what it's about, and it kind of reveals what it's about fairly early on. It's not it's not that it's not subtle, but it's also not subtle. I don't
Mhm.
know how to explain it.
It doesn't want to
Like
be subtle. It's not trying to be
no,
subtle.
no,
Where
no.
this movie is
So
all about the subtle.
yeah,
So yeah, no, I agree, and that's what makes this fun. So, but it's been an absolute blast talking about this with you guys, Matt. Especially you. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Tell
of
folks
course.
about
I'm
your
happy to be
work
here.
and all the stuff, and also tell folks about your book that you've got published, Santa in His Own Words.
Oh yeah. Well, everybody, if you want to hear more of me yapping, I do a show called Two Broke Geeks with my best buddy Justin. We're not releasing super regularly right now because just life is weird and screwy and schedules are weird and screwy, but it's there. It's like, I don't know, 13, 14 years old now, which is really hard to believe, but it is. And it's just general pop culture nonsense and trying to make each other laugh and stuff like that. And also, I mentioned it, Jay mentioned it at the top of the show. We used to do a second podcast together that was an X-Files rewatch podcast called The FBI's Most Unwanted. Stopped doing it partly because I just had a lot going on in life, and partly because it was a weird thing to turn one of my favorite shows in the world into homework and have to sit and watch something I enjoy and treat it like I had to take notes and stuff like
Seven
that. And
seasons of Buffy, I understand.
yeah, I didn't enjoy doing that anymore. It just felt weird to do. So we stopped doing that one, but we got through season 5, I believe. So we got pretty far, or almost all the way through season 5. Anyway, and then yes, Jay, as you mentioned, I did publish a book this year, and Christmas is coming. It is a historical fantasy Christmas novel novella. Somewhere in there is a definition, a page count definition. I don't 100% know what the difference is and what the exact page counts are because I don't think the publishing world 100% understands. But it is a story I wrote that is about the life of Santa Claus. So that is available now on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. It is available in paperback and ebook. So if you have a Kindle or a Nook and you prefer to read that way, you can read it that way as well.
Very cool. Very cool. Always glad to have you on, and we'll definitely have to have
Thanks.
you back
So much
again.
fun. Yeah.
Ron, what do you got going on these days?
I don't have any books in the pipeline, if that's what you're asking.
I've been waiting for the great Ron book at some point.
Yeah, that'll probably never happen. But what I can say is I have a couple of relatively fresh new features that just hit Dinner Geek on the Netflix slash Blumhouse crossover joint Worst X Ever.
Mhm.
I do a deep dive into the how the perpetrator of the first episode was caught and betrayed by his love of dogs, and I do a deep dive into the many fascinating crimes of the terrible ex from the second episode, Jerry Ramertan, who may have been actively framing people for crimes they didn't commit for money. So something to consider there.
I saw you posting about
Yeah,
those articles, Ron, and I have to go watch the show so I can read and fully appreciate your articles.
it is a great crossover of like if you love true crime stuff, but pop culture things, because Ron writes in such these ways, y'all, and it's such a great mix of this. It's some of your best stuff, dude. I've loved it.
Yeah, apparently I've gotten lots of positive feedback off of these things, so people clearly like them. So I'm looking to do a lot more of those going forward. At least the last time I talked to Alec, he was like, this is the true crime beat is now your beat. So just I'll let Netflix know whatever true crime thing they got coming down the pipe to put you on it. And
Nice.
fingers crossed fingers crossed I get screeners for the one I'm trying to get screeners for right now, because that's going to be fabulous. I'm not going to say what it is on air,
Oh,
but
teasing us like that. Okay.
Yes.
I have the same thing. I also do book reviews for a website called Atomic Geekdom, and I worked real hard this year to get a advanced copy of a book I really wanted to read, and I got it, and that was really awesome. And actually, that one's out. I can talk about that one. That's Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle.
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic friggin' horror book. So if you want to read my review of that, that's at atomicgeekdom.com, as
Yeah,
are
I
all my
will.
other book reviews.
You have definitely made me interested in finding that book. I'm on the long waiting list at the library right now for the digital copy.
Yeah,
Um,
Bury Your Gaze in Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle, who just for anybody that doesn't know, I don't know how you couldn't know, but Chuck Tingle is an anonymous author who began his notorious writing career as everybody thought it was a joke. He writes gay. The only word I have for them is weird. Um, Erotica stories like Pounded in the Butt by My Own Butt, Pounded in the Butt by the by the physical manifestation of canceled plans, which actually sounds nice. Butt Raptor Space, I can't remember. Anyway,
yeah, there's some like billionaire dinosaur
space, but
thing. Yeah,
anyway,
lots of
he
being
writes
pounded in the butt
with all
by
these
ludicrous
ridiculous
things.
titles and stuff like that. And he crossed over into the quote unquote mainstream writing queer horror novels. The first in which the first one is Camp Damascus, and the main setting slash center of that story is a queer conversion camp. And the Bury Your Gaze is obviously the title comes out of Hollywood with Bury Your Gaze, and it's a really great book about lots of things like Hollywood and AI and all kinds of great stuff like that. So
I'm telling you, we got to get this guy and like Kelly Brink together to like do a show now. I can feel like that could be unbelievable. So,
man, I tried to do an author interview with Chuck Tingle, and I got pretty far, and then it kind of fell through. So
oh
I was
well,
disappointed.
good luck to both of you guys. I'm not doing anything cool except just talking on this podcast occasionally. So you can follow this show on its social media at Film Strip Pod, and where we share announcements about what we've got coming up and stuff like that. Don't forget to subscribe. Of course, we're on all the podcatchers, and eventually, I don't know, we'll eventually figure out how to get this thing on YouTube. I don't know, and nobody wants to look at our faces, but at least get the audio up there at some point. But bonus points if you leave us a positive review and share the shows. It helps other people find it. We've been doing this for this show's almost old enough to get a learner's permit at this point, so we're getting close on that. But we appreciate your support, and we are
It's
inching,
that old, and I have still found movies you haven't done that I'm gonna
which is
fight myself to come back on this show for.
Please do. Yeah, there's a list we've already had before we got we had like 3 going, and we're like, we bumped you ahead for this to get you on Shocktober, because we are inching so close to episode 400, which will be the first episode of 2025. And it's going to be a mega episode. Me, Ron, Lindsay, Brian, Nick, Kurt, Irina, Nate, all going to be on one big show together talking about one big movie, which somehow in all these years we haven't covered. So that's all we'll say about that right now. But we had a little fun picking that one out. We'll tell the whole story later, but that's coming around. Of course, we got more Shocktober episodes, and then we're coming down near the end of the year, so we've got a little more Star Trek still going. That's going to be an ongoing series that carries over into 2025. And, we're about to hit the holiday times, y'all. We're going to find some good holiday trash. I mean, it wouldn't be us if we didn't do that. We'll invite some of our friends on to talk about all that as we patiently await the Blumhouse reboot of New Year's Evil. I'm just speaking it into power, into existence. I'm just going to keep saying it until they finally do it, because it's right there, y'all. It's right there. So, but make that happen. And of course, folks, we keep doing this because it's fun to just talk about movies with our friends, and it's fun to talk about them with y'all. So leave us a comment on our socials. Let us know what you think, and we appreciate the support. So for our guest Matt, for Ron, I'm Jay. Thank you for listening to Film Strip.
Thank you for listening to Film Strip. You can find more episodes on our website, filmstrippodcast.com. The Film Strip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.